So, you were told you need to eat more protein. You want to stay strong, keep your energy up, and feel good for years to come. And then they try to sell you a plastic tub of chalky powder that costs more than a week's worth of dinner. It feels like the system is built to make healthy eating hard, expensive, and even artificial. Before there were powders, tubs, and influencer smoothies, there were trees, grasses, and wild plants dropping everything your body needs right onto the ground. Because protein doesn't come from a factory, it isn't something sold in a tub, it's something nature gives us, free and abundant. Every autumn, when the air turns crisp and the trees begin to let go, the forest floor becomes nature's own protein aisle, overflowing with nuts, seeds, and wild grains. The same mess that clutters the ground, the acorns, the walnuts, the hickory shells, the pine cones, can give you the strength, the protein to make it through the cold months. Today, we're gathering 7 wild seeds and nuts that put chalky store-bought protein powders to shame. No shaker bottle required. And if you long for a time when getting groceries didn't involve a credit card, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. These are black walnuts I have drying in my basement. If you're used to the mild, buttery taste of walnuts you find in the grocery store, usually English walnuts, black walnuts are a whole different experience. They're darker, earthier, and more complex, with a rich, slightly sweet but bitter flavor. And they pack a punch nutritionally too. About 7 grams of protein per ounce, plus omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, and manganese. A handful of these in a salad, porridge, or roasted with other seeds can give you the kind of nutrition a lot of people reach for powders to get. Cracking them takes patience. Those shells are seriously tough, but the payoff is worth it. Indigenous peoples across the eastern United States, from Michigan to Florida, relied on black walnuts for centuries, not just for nutrition, but as a seasonal marker. When the nuts dropped, winter was coming and they were ready. You can eat them raw if you like, roast them to deepen the flavor, or grind them into a nutty flour for baking. Plus, getting to the nuts is a workout in itself. When most people think of acorns, they imagine a single type of oak dropping nuts once a year. But the reality is far more abundant and fascinating. There are dozens of species producing acorns, from the familiar red and white oaks to less obvious trees that aren't true oaks but produce similar edible nuts. Each has its own flavor, size, and texture, some sweet, some rich and earthy, all packed with protein and healthy fats. Acorns are everywhere in autumn, from the live oaks that line the streets of Mobile, Alabama, to the Oregon white oaks of the Pacific Northwest. Walk through a forest or a neighborhood lined with trees, and the ground is literally littered with protein. Collect enough, which is easy because they drop a lot, and you've got a harvest that can sustain you through the colder months. Acorns are more than just calories. They're a rich source of protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. They also contain magnesium, potassium, and small amounts of calcium and iron, making them a well-rounded wild food. That abundance and nutrition is why acorns were a staple for almost all indigenous peoples across North America, who knew which species were best for eating raw, roasting, or grinding into flour. Preparation does take a little patience. Most acorns contain tannins, bitter compounds that can upset your stomach, but with leaching in water, that bitterness disappears, leaving behind a mild, slightly sweet, nutty flavor. Once prepared, acorns can be eaten raw, roasted, or ground into flour for bread, porridge, or even pancakes. With so many species and so much abundance, it's easy to see why those small nuts were such an essential source of protein for centuries. There are more than 15 species of hickory trees across North America, each producing nuts with slightly different flavors and textures. Some are sweet and buttery, others rich and earthy, but all are packed with protein, healthy fats, and minerals. Hickory nuts are abundant in the fall. Walk through a forest or even along roadsides in hickory country and you'll see the ground littered with those nutrient-dense nuts. Collect enough and you've got a wild harvest that can sustain you through the cold months. A natural pantry provided by the trees themselves. Nutritionally, hickory nuts are a powerhouse. They contain roughly 4 to 5 grams of protein per ounce, heart-healthy fats, and minerals like magnesium, potassium, and manganese. They also provide complex carbohydrates, making them an excellent source of sustained energy. Indigenous peoples across North America relied on the hickory nuts for centuries, often roasting, boiling, or grinding them into flour for breads and porridges. The flavor is rich and buttery, making them a natural addition to desserts, cereals, and savory dishes alike. Getting to the nut can take a little effort. The shells are tough, but it's worth it. Once cracked, hickory nuts can be eaten raw, roasted to deepen their flavor, or ground into flour. Most people reaching for a protein boost think of whey, the most prominent form of protein powder. Whey comes from milk, and it's marketed as a fast, complete protein for building muscle and staying strong. On paper, it sounds perfect. But for many people, it's not the best choice. Whey can be hard to digest, especially if you're lactose intolerant or sensitive to dairy. It can spike insulin, contribute to bloating, and even trigger inflammation like arthritis in some people. Plus, it's highly processed, stripped from milk, concentrated, flavored, and often loaded with additives. Compare that to whole foods, nuts, seeds, and legumes, and the difference is clear. Real foods give you protein along with fiber, healthy fats, vitamins, minerals, and all those phytonutrients that a plastic tub of powder can't provide. You are beginning to think this video was completely nuts. But nature has even more protein-packed surprises for us. Dock seeds from plants like curly dock and broadleaf dock are small, unassuming, and everywhere in the wild. Most people walk past them without a second glance, but those little seeds are nutritional powerhouses. They contain protein, fiber, and essential minerals like magnesium, calcium, and iron, making them a fantastic addition to your wild pantry. Collecting dock seeds is easy in late summer and fall when the seed heads turn brown and start to release their tiny treasures. You can sprinkle them raw into cereals or salads, lightly toast them to bring out a nutty flavor, or grind them into a flour to add protein and texture to baked goods or smoothies, if you must. Next up, pine nuts. The tiny treasure tucked inside pine cones. Most people only think of them in pesto or gourmet cooking, but in the wild they're abundant, nutritious, and incredibly versatile. They're called nuts, but technically they're seeds, the edible part inside the pine cone. There are dozens of pine species across North America producing edible seeds, from the familiar eastern white pine to the southwestern pinyon pines. Each species has its own flavor, some rich and buttery, others slightly sweet or resinous, but all are packed with protein, healthy fats, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin E. A small handful goes a long way towards giving your body a protein boost and sustaining energy throughout the day. Harvesting pine nuts is easier than most people think. Once the cones mature and start to open, the seeds can be collected directly from the trees or gathered from the ground beneath. With so many species and widespread trees, there's no shortage of these little protein powerhouses. Once collected, pine nuts can be eaten raw, lightly toasted to deepen their flavor, or ground into a nutty meal for baked goods, sauces, or porridges. They're another example of how wild seeds deliver protein, healthy fats, and minerals in a form nature intended. Abundant, nutrient-dense, and completely free. It's wild to think that over half of Americans rely on credit cards just to put groceries on the table. Even more concerning, nearly 1 in 4 adults carry debt, balancing or missing payments just to cover rising food costs. It's a shame we've been taught to overlook the free abundance around us when so much wholesome nutrition is literally underfoot. Next, let's go back to true nuts, beech nuts, from American beech trees. Beech nuts are small, triangular, and packed inside prickly husks that fall in autumn. They may be tiny, but don't let that fool you. They're rich in protein, healthy fats, and minerals like magnesium, manganese, and potassium. A handful of these little nuts is a solid, energy-dense snack straight from the forest floor. American beech trees are widespread across the eastern United States and Canada, producing abundant crops most years. Walk beneath a mature beech tree in fall, and you'll see the ground littered with these tiny treasures. A natural protein pantry waiting to be gathered. Indigenous peoples and early settlers alike valued beech nuts. They were eaten raw, roasted to bring out a richer flavor, or ground into meal for breads, porridges, and other dishes. The nuts have a slightly sweet, earthy flavor that pairs beautifully with other wild nuts and seeds. Cracking the husk takes a little effort, but the payoff is worth it. Finally, let's talk about one of the most abundant and easy to harvest wild seeds. The seeds of wild sunflowers. These are the wild relatives of the cultivated sunflower, and their large, nutrient-dense seeds are packed with protein, healthy fats, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin E. Wild sunflowers grow prolifically in meadows, roadsides, and open fields across North America. By late summer and early fall, their heavy seed heads are ready to harvest. A simple shake or a careful hand stripping is all it takes to collect a bounty, enough to store and enjoy throughout the colder months. Once gathered, wild sunflower seeds can be eaten raw, roasted to deepen their flavor, or added to porridge, salads, or baked goods. They're a perfect example of how wild seeds provide a natural, abundant, and nutrient-rich protein source. No processing, no additives, just nature's bounty. You might notice black-eyed Susans nearby. Their seeds are smaller, but also edible and related to the sunflower family, making them a fun bonus for any wild seed pantry. The beauty of all these wild seeds and nuts is that they can be stored and enjoyed throughout the cold months. Black walnuts, acorns, hickory nuts, dock seeds, pine nuts, beech nuts, black-eyed Susan seeds, and even smaller treasures like lamb quarter seeds all keep well when dried or roasted, giving you a pantry straight from the forest. Other wild seeds like amaranth, sunflower, and even plantain seeds can also be gathered in abundance and stored for winter use. Each brings its own flavor, texture, and nutritional punch, protein, healthy fats, fiber, vitamins, and minerals, ready to sustain you when fresh produce is scarce. No freezer, plastic tub, or subscription service is needed. Just nature's bounty, abundant, free, and waiting for you to gather. That feeling of security, knowing you've nourished yourself and your loved ones with food you gathered, not food you had to go in debt for, that's a true win. If you enjoy discovering these wild sources of protein and nutrition, consider sharing this knowledge with your community. Teach a friend to forage, swap seeds with a neighbor, or gather together to celebrate the abundance all around us. Food doesn't have to come from a factory, and neither does nutrition. Sometimes the best pantry is growing free right outside your door. Curious which wild foods can outdo milk for calcium? Tap the video right there on the left. If you like this one, share it with a friend. Every share helps someone learn to eat just a little better. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a like if you found this helpful. And as always, eat the weeds.